Have you ever felt the quiet exhaustion of staying connected to people who no longer respect you, understand you, or value your presence, yet you keep holding on because you don't want to seem cold, heartless, or alone? You don't fight with them, you don't hate them, but deep inside, something feels heavy every time you interact, like your peace is slowly being drained. Buddhism teaches a truth that most people never learn, that not every goodbye needs an argument, not every ending needs an explanation, and not every distance needs to be announced. Some of the most powerful decisions in life are made in silence. Quietly letting people go is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the moment you stop begging for understanding and start choosing inner peace. And once you understand this, you will never waste your energy on the wrong people again. 1. Some connections end naturally, just like seasons. In nature, nothing feels guilty for changing, and nothing tries to explain itself for becoming something new. A tree does not apologize when its leaves fall. It does not chase the leaves as they drift away. It understands, without thinking, that change is part of life's rhythm. The leaves were never meant to stay forever, and the tree does not suffer because it accepts this truth. In the same way, the sun does not stay all day, the moon does not shine all night, and the river does not ask permission when it changes its direction after heavy rain. Everything in nature moves, transforms, and lets go without resistance. Buddhism teaches that human relationships follow this same natural law. Some people enter your life when you are learning, struggling, healing, or becoming stronger. They walk beside you for a while, share moments, conversations, and emotions, and then slowly drift away when your life begins to change. This does not mean anyone failed. It does not mean someone was wrong or evil. It simply means the season that brought you together has ended. Just as winter turns into spring and spring turns into summer, relationships also change when your inner world begins to shift. Suffering begins when the mind refuses to accept this natural ending. When someone leaves your life, the pain often does not come from their absence, but from your resistance to reality. You start asking why they changed, why they left, why they are no longer the same. You replay old memories, hoping to return to a version of life that no longer exists. This is like forcing a tree to keep its leaves during winter. The tree was never meant to hold on, and neither were you. When you cling to people who no longer align with who you are becoming, you trap yourself in emotional exhaustion. Quietly letting people go is not abandonment, and it is not cold-hearted. It is an act of wisdom. It is recognizing that not everyone is meant to walk the entire journey with you. Some people are teachers for a chapter, not companions for a lifetime. When you accept this, you stop fighting life. You stop chasing explanations. You stop creating unnecessary drama and emotional conflict. Acceptance does not require arguments, long conversations, or blame. It simply requires awareness and the courage to allow change to happen. Buddhism reminds us that peace comes when we flow with life instead of resisting it. When you quietly let someone go, you are not erasing what you shared. You are honoring it by allowing it to end naturally. You carry the lessons, the growth, and the understanding forward without carrying the attachment. And in that quiet acceptance, your heart becomes lighter, your mind becomes calmer, and you begin to move forward without bitterness, without anger, and without regret. 2. Detachment is not hatred. It is clarity. Many people are afraid of detachment because they misunderstand it. They think detaching from someone means becoming cold, heartless, or bitter. They believe that if they step back, it means they never cared. Buddhism teaches the opposite. Detachment is not hatred, and it is not emotional violence. Detachment is clarity. It is the moment you finally see a situation as it truly is, instead of how you wish it could be. Hatred is loud. It wants revenge. It wants the other person to feel pain. Detachment is silent. It does not want to harm anyone. It simply refuses to suffer unnecessarily. When you detach, you are not closing your heart. You are removing confusion from it. You are no longer allowing someone else's behavior, moods, or inconsistency to control your inner peace. You stop reacting, not because you are weak, but because you finally understand. Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering. When you are attached, you expect people to behave a certain way. You expect loyalty, understanding, effort, or emotional safety. When those expectations are not met, the mind becomes restless. You start overthinking, doubting yourself, replaying conversations, and blaming yourself for things that were never in your control. Detachment frees you from this mental prison. It allows you to see people as they are, not as who you hoped they would become. Detachment does not mean you suddenly stop caring. It means you stop forcing care where it is not returned. It means you stop investing emotional energy into situations that repeatedly leave you drained. You no longer chase clarity from people who live in confusion. You no longer beg for consistency from those who are comfortable being unpredictable. This is not cruelty. This is self-awareness. When you detach, something powerful happens inside you. The emotional storms begin to calm. The constant need for answers fades. You no longer feel the urge to explain yourself again and again. You understand that some people are not meant to understand you, and that this does not reduce your worth. Clarity brings peace because it removes false hope. And false hope, according to Buddhism, is one of the most painful attachments of all. Detachment also teaches compassion without self-destruction. You can wish someone well and still choose distance. You can forgive someone and still protect your boundaries. You can accept someone's limitations without allowing those limitations to damage your mental and emotional health. This balance is wisdom. It is choosing peace without carrying resentment in your heart. Buddhism reminds us that clarity is freedom. When you see clearly, you stop fighting reality. You stop asking why someone cannot give you what they do not have. You stop waiting for people to change when they are not ready. Detachment allows you to step back, breathe, and return your attention to your own growth. And in that space, you begin to feel lighter, calmer, and more grounded. Detachment is not the end of love. It is the end of illusion, and when illusion ends, suffering ends with it. 3. Explaining yourself to the wrong people drains your life energy. Buddhism teaches that your energy is one of the most valuable things you have, yet most people waste it without realizing how. Every time you explain yourself to someone who has already decided not to understand you, a small part of your inner peace is taken away. You repeat your reasons, you clarify your intentions. You try different words, hoping something will finally make sense to them, but nothing changes, because the problem was never your explanation. The problem was their unwillingness to listen. There is a deep difference between being misunderstood and being ignored. When someone truly cares, they may not understand you immediately, but they are open. They listen. They try. When someone does not value you, no explanation will ever be enough. Buddhism teaches that recognizing this difference is wisdom. It saves you from exhausting emotional battles that were never meant to be won. Many people suffer because they believe that if they just explain themselves one more time, things will improve. They think clarity comes from words, but clarity comes from awareness. When someone repeatedly dismisses your feelings, crosses your boundaries, or makes you feel small, explaining yourself does not bring peace. It only deepens attachment. The mind keeps hoping for validation, and that hope becomes a quiet form of suffering. Buddhism reminds us that silence can be more powerful than speech. When you stop explaining yourself to the wrong people, you are not giving up. You are choosing where your energy flows. You begin to notice how much lighter you feel when you are no longer defending your emotions, your choices, or your growth. You stop trying to prove your worth, because you realize your worth was never up for debate. Explaining yourself to someone who does not respect you often leads to self-doubt. You start questioning whether you are asking for too much, feeling too deeply, or expecting too much kindness. Buddhism teaches that this inner conflict is a sign of misplaced energy. When your peace depends on someone else's understanding, you lose your center. Quietly stepping back restores that center. When you let go of the need to be understood by everyone, something shifts inside you. You begin to trust yourself more. You listen to your own inner voice instead of external opinions. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. Your thoughts slow down. Your breathing becomes deeper. This is not avoidance. This is alignment. Buddhism teaches that wise people do not argue with reality. They observe, understand, and adjust. When you stop explaining yourself to the wrong people, you are practicing this wisdom. You are conserving your life energy for healing, growth, and peace. And in that quiet choice, your mind becomes clearer, your heart becomes calmer, and your path forward becomes lighter. 4. Silence is stronger than closure conversations. Many people believe that healing only comes after one last conversation, one final explanation, or one moment where everything is finally said and understood. The mind tells you that if you just talk it out one more time, you will feel peace. But Buddhism teaches something very different. True peace does not come from words exchanged between two people. It comes from the quiet understanding that grows inside you when attachment begins to dissolve. Closure conversations often reopen wounds instead of healing them. You go into them hoping to feel heard, validated, or understood, but you come out feeling heavier than before. Old emotions rise again. Defensiveness appears. Blame enters the space. Instead of calm, you feel drained. Buddhism teaches that when something has already shown you its nature, more words are not needed. Reality has already spoken. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength when it comes from clarity. When you choose silence, you are choosing not to feed the cycle of emotional attachment. You are no longer seeking resolution from someone who may not be capable of giving it. You understand that some people cannot meet you at the level of awareness you are reaching, and forcing communication only creates more suffering. Buddhism teaches that inner closure is far more important than external closure. You do not need another person to admit their mistakes for you to move on. You do not need an apology for your heart to heal. Healing happens when you stop expecting others to change so you can feel at peace. Silence allows your nervous system to relax. It creates space where thoughts slowly settle and emotions soften. There is also wisdom in recognizing when talking becomes attachment in disguise. Sometimes the desire for closure is actually the desire to stay connected. The mind looks for one more reason to hold on, one more emotional exchange, one more moment of intensity. Buddhism teaches that freedom comes when you see this pattern and gently step away from it. Silence breaks the loop without creating conflict. When you stop engaging in closure conversations, you begin to reclaim your energy. Your mind stops replaying imaginary dialogues. Your heart stops waiting for responses that may never come. You return your attention to the present moment, where peace always lives. This is not avoidance. This is maturity. It is knowing when words no longer serve growth. Silence also protects your dignity. It allows you to leave situations without bitterness, without drama, and without lowering yourself emotionally. You do not need to prove your pain. You do not need to justify your boundaries. Buddhism teaches that the most powerful departures are quiet ones, because they come from self-respect rather than reaction. In silence, understanding deepens. You begin to see the situation clearly without emotional fog. You accept what happened without rewriting the past. You stop asking why and start accepting what is. And in that acceptance, peace slowly takes root. Buddhism reminds us that not every ending needs a conversation. Some endings need space. Some endings need stillness. Some endings need silence. And when you choose silence with awareness, it becomes one of the strongest tools for inner freedom. 5. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Buddhism teaches that the mind and heart are sacred spaces. They are not places where everyone should walk freely without awareness. Yet many people suffer because they give unlimited access to those who have not shown care, respect, or responsibility. They share their thoughts, fears, dreams, and emotions with people who listen carelessly or respond with indifference. Over time, this creates deep inner exhaustion. Your inner world is sensitive. It absorbs tone, energy, and intention. When someone repeatedly dismisses your feelings, minimizes your experiences, or uses your vulnerability without compassion, the harm may not be loud, but it is deep. Buddhism teaches mindfulness not only of thoughts, but of relationships. Awareness means recognizing how certain people make you feel after interactions. Do you feel lighter or heavier? Do you feel calm or restless? Do you feel seen or drained? These signals are not random. They are messages from your inner wisdom. Many people believe that love means unlimited access, but Buddhism teaches balanced compassion. Compassion includes self-compassion. It is possible to care about someone and still choose distance. It is possible to wish someone well and still protect your peace. When you quietly limit access to your inner world, you are not becoming selfish, you are becoming aware. You are recognizing that emotional intimacy should be earned through consistency, respect, and safety. Giving access to the wrong people slowly teaches your mind to stay on guard. You begin to overthink what you share. You regret opening up. You replay conversations and wish you had stayed silent. Buddhism teaches that these patterns are signs of misaligned boundaries. When boundaries are unclear, the heart feels exposed and unprotected. Quietly stepping back restores balance. You stop oversharing. You stop seeking emotional comfort from places that cannot provide it. Protecting your inner world also allows it to heal. When you are no longer constantly explaining your feelings or defending your emotions, the mind becomes quieter. You begin to sit with yourself without fear. Your thoughts slow down. Your breath deepens. Buddhism teaches that peace arises naturally when the mind is no longer overstimulated by external emotional demands. There is also dignity in quiet boundaries. You do not need to announce who has access and who does not. You simply change how much of yourself you give. You become selective with your words, your time, and your emotional energy. This selectiveness is not cruelty, it is wisdom. It allows you to remain open without being wounded again and again. As you protect your inner world, you may notice that some people fade away. This is natural. Not everyone can stay when they no longer have unrestricted access. Buddhism teaches that this is not a loss. It is a realignment. Those who remain are those who respect your silence, your growth, and your boundaries. And even if no one remains for a while, you discover something powerful. You discover that your own presence is enough. In Buddhism, peace is not something you receive from others. It is something you preserve within yourself. When you choose who gets access to your inner world, you are choosing peace over chaos, awareness over habit, and self-respect over emotional hunger. And in that choice, your life becomes quieter, clearer, and far more balanced. 6. Growth often requires walking alone for a while. One of the hardest truths to accept in life is that growth does not always happen in company. Buddhism teaches that transformation is often a quiet process, and quiet processes rarely attract crowds. When you begin to change internally, when your values shift, when your awareness deepens, and when your tolerance for chaos decreases, your path naturally becomes more solitary. This is not because you are doing something wrong, but because growth demands space, silence, and honesty with yourself. Many people fear being alone because they associate solitude with rejection, loneliness, or failure. But Buddhism teaches a different understanding. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. Solitude is not emptiness. Solitude is a classroom. It is where you finally hear your own thoughts without interruption. It is where you see your habits clearly, without distraction. It is where you learn who you are, without depending on anyone else to reflect you back to yourself. When you start letting people go quietly, especially those who no longer align with your inner direction, life can feel unusually silent at first. The phone rings less, conversations become fewer, distractions fade, and in that silence, the mind may panic. It may say something is missing. It may tempt you to reconnect with familiar people, even if they drained you, simply to avoid discomfort. Buddhism teaches that this discomfort is not danger, it is withdrawal from attachment. And like all withdrawals, it passes if you do not feed it. Walking alone forces you to confront parts of yourself you once avoided. Without constant interaction, you begin to notice your emotional patterns more clearly. You see where you seek validation. You see where fear controls your decisions. You see how often you compromised your peace just to avoid being alone. This awareness can be uncomfortable, but Buddhism teaches that awareness is the beginning of freedom. You cannot heal what you refuse to see. Growth also requires unlearning. You unlearn the habit of explaining yourself to everyone. You unlearn the need to be liked. You unlearn the belief that your value comes from how many people stay in your life. These lessons are not taught in crowds. They are learned in stillness. They are learned when you sit with yourself, breathe through discomfort, and realize that you are still whole, even when no one is watching. Many people stay emotionally stuck because they never allow themselves to be alone long enough to grow. They move from one attachment to another, one distraction to the next, one relationship to another, carrying the same wounds everywhere they go. Buddhism teaches that solitude breaks this cycle. When you stop running, the mind settles. When the mind settles, clarity arises. And when clarity arises, you begin making decisions from wisdom instead of fear. Walking alone also strengthens self-trust. When there is no one to lean on emotionally, you begin leaning inward. You listen to your intuition more closely. You learn to calm yourself instead of seeking comfort externally. You become your own safe place. This is one of the most powerful transformations Buddhism offers. A person who can sit with themselves peacefully cannot be controlled easily, manipulated emotionally, or shaken by temporary losses. There will be moments when solitude feels heavy, moments when old memories surface, moments when you question whether letting people go was the right choice. Buddhism teaches that these moments are part of the purification process. Just as muddy water becomes clear when left undisturbed, the mind becomes clear when you stop stirring it with constant social noise. If you remain patient, the heaviness slowly lifts, and what remains is calm awareness. Another truth Buddhism reveals is that not everyone can walk with you as you grow, because growth exposes differences. When you become more mindful, people who thrive on drama feel uncomfortable around you. When you choose peace, people who live in chaos feel judged, even if you say nothing. When you stop reacting, people who relied on your reactions lose interest. This is not your fault. This is the natural result of inner evolution. Walking alone also teaches humility. You realize that you do not need to be special, admired, or validated to live meaningfully. You learn to find joy in simple moments, in breathing deeply, in quiet mornings, in clarity of thought. Buddhism teaches that true happiness is simple, but simplicity requires letting go of excess, including excess relationships that distract you from yourself. Eventually, something beautiful happens. Solitude stops feeling lonely and starts feeling spacious. You feel less rushed, less pressured, less emotionally dependent. You begin to enjoy your own presence. You feel grounded rather than empty. And from this grounded place, future connections become healthier because they are chosen from wholeness, not need. Buddhism does not teach isolation forever. It teaches balance. Walking alone for a while allows you to rebuild your inner foundation. When that foundation is strong, relationships no longer define you, complete you, or destabilize you. They simply complement your life. And until that foundation is rebuilt, solitude is not punishment. It is preparation. Growth requires silence. Growth requires distance. Growth requires courage to walk alone when necessary. And when you accept this, you stop fearing solitude and start respecting it. You understand that some of the most important transformations in your life will happen quietly, without witnesses, without applause, and without company. And that is exactly how real growth is meant to happen. 7. Peace is the highest form of self-respect. Buddhism teaches that peace is not weakness, and it is not something you earn by pleasing others. Peace is the natural state of a mind that no longer betrays itself. When you quietly let people go, when you stop chasing connection at the cost of your well-being, you are not giving up on love. You are choosing self-respect. And self-respect, according to Buddhism, is one of the strongest foundations for inner peace. Many people live in constant emotional tension because they sacrifice their peace to maintain familiarity. They stay connected to people who confuse them, drain them, or repeatedly hurt them, simply because letting go feels frightening. The mind tells them that holding on is safer than being alone. But Buddhism teaches that this is an illusion. There is nothing safe about living in constant inner conflict. There is nothing peaceful about suppressing your truth to keep others comfortable. Self-respect begins the moment you stop ignoring your inner signals, the tightness in your chest after certain conversations, the exhaustion that follows repeated emotional explanations, the feeling that you are shrinking just to stay connected. Buddhism teaches mindfulness of these experiences because they are not accidents. They are signs that your peace is being compromised. When you honor these signs, you begin to live with integrity. Quietly letting people go is an act of deep self-respect because it does not come from ego. Ego wants confrontation. Ego wants to be right. Ego wants the other person to feel the pain. Peace does not need any of that. Peace simply steps away. It chooses not to engage. It chooses not to explain endlessly. It chooses not to stay where it is not nurtured. This quiet choice requires strength because it means you are no longer seeking validation from the outside. Buddhism teaches that when you respect your peace, your entire life begins to align. Your thoughts become calmer because they are no longer reacting to emotional instability. Your emotions settle because they are no longer constantly triggered. Your actions become intentional rather than impulsive. This inner alignment creates a sense of dignity that cannot be taken away by anyone else's behavior. There is also humility in choosing peace. You accept that you cannot control others. You stop trying to fix people, convince them, or wait for them to become different. Buddhism teaches that attachment to how people should be is a major source of suffering. When you release this attachment, you free yourself. You allow people to be who they are while choosing what is healthy for you. As peace becomes your priority, you begin to notice a shift in your boundaries. You no longer feel the need to react immediately. You pause before responding. You choose silence where you once chose arguments. You walk away where you once begged to be understood. This is not emotional shutdown. This is emotional maturity. Buddhism teaches that restraint is wisdom when it prevents suffering. Self-respect also changes how you relate to solitude. You stop seeing being alone as a punishment. You begin to see it as a sign that you are no longer willing to settle for connections that cost you your peace. Solitude becomes a space of restoration rather than emptiness. In that space, your mind recovers, your nervous system calms, and your sense of self strengthens. Another powerful truth Buddhism teaches is that peace attracts clarity. When your life is no longer crowded with emotional chaos, you begin to see things clearly. You see which relationships were rooted in habit rather than alignment. You see which attachments were based on fear rather than love. This clarity does not make you bitter, it makes you wise. Choosing peace also teaches you how to love differently. Love no longer feels desperate. It no longer feels like survival. It becomes spacious, calm, and grounded. You stop clinging. You stop fearing loss. You understand that anything meant to stay will stay without force. And anything that leaves was never meant to cost you your inner stability. Buddhism reminds us that the greatest victory is not over others, but over inner chaos. When you choose peace, you win that victory quietly. You do not announce it. You do not seek applause. You simply live differently. You speak less, react less, and breathe more deeply. This quiet transformation is the highest form of self-respect because it honors your life energy. In the end, quietly letting people go is not about rejection. It is about alignment. It is about choosing a life that feels calm on the inside, even if it looks simple on the outside. Buddhism teaches that a peaceful mind is worth more than any connection built on suffering. And when you truly understand this, you stop chasing people and start protecting your peace. Peace is not something you ask for. Peace is something you choose. And choosing peace is the strongest way to respect yourself. 8. Letting go quietly is how you reclaim your inner freedom. Buddhism teaches that true freedom is not found by changing the world around you, but by changing the way you relate to it. Many people believe they are trapped by other people's actions, words, or choices, but the deeper truth is that they are trapped by attachment. Attachment to how people used to be. Attachment to how relationships should feel. Attachment to the hope that someone will eventually understand, change, or return. Quietly letting people go is the moment you step out of this invisible prison. Inner freedom begins when you stop negotiating with reality. When someone shows you, again and again, that they cannot meet you with respect, consistency, or awareness, continuing to stay emotionally involved is not loyalty, it is self-betrayal. Buddhism teaches that suffering continues not because pain exists, but because the mind refuses to release what no longer serves it. Quiet letting go is the act of ending this resistance. Most people think letting go must be dramatic. They think it requires confrontation, final messages, emotional speeches, or visible closure. But Buddhism teaches that the deepest releases are silent. They happen inside. They happen when you stop checking, when you stop hoping, when you stop replaying conversations, when you stop waiting for something that no longer aligns with your path. This inner release is powerful because it returns control to you. When you let go quietly, you reclaim your attention. Attention is life energy. Wherever your attention goes, your emotional strength follows. When your attention is constantly focused on people who confuse you, disappoint you, or drain you, your life energy leaks away slowly. Buddhism teaches mindfulness of attention because it shapes your inner world. Quietly letting people go allows your attention to return to the present moment, where peace actually exists. Inner freedom also means releasing the need to be chosen. Many people suffer silently because they want to be valued by someone who is unable or unwilling to value them. They wait, they adjust, they lower themselves emotionally, hoping that patience will be rewarded. Buddhism teaches that worth is not granted by others. It is recognized within. When you stop waiting to be chosen, you choose yourself, and this choice changes everything. Letting go quietly frees you from emotional dependency. Emotional dependency is not love. It is fear wearing the mask of attachment. It is the fear of being alone, the fear of emptiness, the fear that without certain people you will lose meaning. Buddhism teaches that meaning does not come from people, it comes from awareness. When you sit with yourself without distraction, without emotional noise, you begin to see that you are already complete. There is a deep peace that comes when you stop chasing emotional reassurance. Your mind becomes quieter because it is no longer scanning for signs, messages, or validation. Your body relaxes because it is no longer bracing for disappointment. Your heart softens because it is no longer holding tension. This is inner freedom. It is not excitement. It is calm clarity. Quietly letting people go also frees you from resentment. When you fight endings, resentment grows. You feel wronged. You feel unappreciated. You feel bitter. But when you accept endings with awareness, resentment dissolves. Buddhism teaches that resentment is a heavy burden carried by the one who refuses to release. When you let go quietly, you are not saying what happened was acceptable. You are saying you no longer want to carry it. Inner freedom means you no longer need to tell your side of the story to feel whole. You no longer need others to admit fault for you to move forward. You understand that your healing does not require their participation. Buddhism teaches that healing is an inner process. It unfolds when you stop waiting for external permission to be at peace. This freedom also changes how you relate to future connections. You become more present, more selective, and less reactive. You no longer rush into emotional bonds out of loneliness. You allow relationships to unfold naturally. You observe actions instead of clinging to words. You trust yourself enough to walk away early when something feels wrong. This is not fear. This is wisdom gained through awareness. Letting go quietly teaches patience with life. You understand that not everything needs an immediate response. Not every loss is a failure. Not every ending is a punishment. Buddhism teaches impermanence as a path to peace. Everything changes. When you accept this deeply, you stop fighting the flow of life and begin moving with it. There is also dignity in quiet release. You do not burn bridges unnecessarily. You do not carry hatred. You do not create emotional chaos. You simply step back with grace. This dignity strengthens your sense of self. You know who you are without needing to prove it. You know what you deserve without demanding it. Inner freedom is also freedom from the past. When you quietly let people go, memories lose their emotional charge. They become lessons instead of wounds. You remember without pain. You reflect without longing. Buddhism teaches that memories only hurt when attachment remains. When attachment dissolves, memories soften. As you reclaim inner freedom, you begin to live more simply. You value peace over stimulation, presence over performance. Depth over quantity. Your life may look quieter on the outside, but it feels richer on the inside. Buddhism teaches that a calm life is not an empty life. It is a life free from unnecessary suffering. Eventually, you realize something profound. Letting people go quietly was never about them. It was about returning to yourself. It was about ending the habit of abandoning your inner peace for external connection. It was about choosing clarity over confusion, awareness over attachment, and freedom over familiarity. Buddhism teaches that liberation is not dramatic. It is subtle. It happens when you stop clinging, when you stop resisting, when you stop chasing. Quietly letting people go is one of the most powerful steps toward this liberation, because it teaches you that nothing outside of you is worth losing yourself over. And when you finally understand this, you walk through life lighter, not because you lost people, but because you lost the chains that were binding your mind. This is inner freedom. And this is the quiet power of letting go. 9. When you let go quietly, you become emotionally uncontrollable. Buddhism teaches that the greatest freedom a human being can experience is not freedom from people, situations, or circumstances, but freedom from emotional control. Most suffering in life does not come from what happens to us, but from how deeply we allow external things to disturb our inner balance. When you quietly let people go, something profound begins to happen inside you. You slowly become emotionally uncontrollable, not cold, not distant, but grounded, steady, and internally sovereign. Emotional control happens when your peace depends on someone else's behavior, when their attention lifts you and their absence crushes you. When their words decide your mood and their silence fills your mind with noise. Buddhism teaches that this state is not love, it is bondage. It is attachment disguised as connection. Quietly letting people go is how you loosen these invisible chains without creating conflict. At first, the mind resists this freedom. It feels unfamiliar. It feels empty. The mind has grown used to emotional stimulation, emotional highs and lows, emotional dependence. When that stimulation disappears, the mind panics and calls it loneliness. But Buddhism teaches that this discomfort is temporary. It is the mind detoxing from dependency. If you remain patient and aware, the discomfort passes and something far more powerful takes its place. As you stop reacting to people who once triggered you, you begin to notice a shift in your nervous system. Your body no longer stays on constant alert. Your heart rate slows. Your breathing deepens. Your thoughts stop racing toward worst-case scenarios. This is not coincidence. This is emotional regulation returning to its natural state. Buddhism teaches that calmness is the default condition of the mind when attachment is reduced. When you quietly let people go, you also reclaim authorship over your emotional life. You stop handing that power to others. You no longer wait to feel okay based on how someone treats you. You begin to generate peace internally. This is emotional sovereignty. It means you feel deeply, but you are not controlled by what you feel. You experience emotions without drowning in them. This inner sovereignty changes how you respond to disrespect, inconsistency, or indifference. Where you once felt the urge to confront, explain, or react, you now feel stillness. Not because you are afraid, but because you see clearly. Buddhism teaches that clarity dissolves the need for reaction. When you understand that someone's behavior reflects their inner state, not your worth, emotional hooks lose their grip. Being emotionally uncontrollable does not mean nothing affects you. It means nothing owns you. Pain may arise, but it does not dominate. Disappointment may appear, but it does not define your days. Loss may occur, but it does not collapse your identity. Buddhism teaches impermanence not to numb the heart, but to free it. When you accept that everything changes, you stop clinging to emotional outcomes. Quietly letting people go also breaks the habit of emotional bargaining. You no longer think, if I do this, they will stay, or if I say this, they will understand, or if I give more, they will appreciate me. Buddhism teaches that giving from fear always leads to suffering. When you let go quietly, you give only when it feels aligned, not when it feels necessary for survival. As emotional control loosens, you begin to experience a deeper sense of self-trust. You trust that you will be okay, regardless of who stays or leaves. You trust your ability to adapt. You trust your inner resilience. This trust is powerful because it removes desperation from your life. You stop chasing emotional security externally and start building it internally. There is also a quiet confidence that emerges when you are no longer emotionally controllable. You do not announce it, you do not display it loudly, but people feel it. Your presence becomes calmer. Your reactions become measured. Your words carry weight because they are no longer fueled by emotional urgency. Buddhism teaches that still water reflects the truth clearly. A calm mind does the same. Being emotionally uncontrollable also changes how you experience conflict. You no longer feel the need to win arguments. You no longer feel threatened by disagreement. You listen without absorbing negativity. You respond without aggression. And sometimes you choose silence not because you have nothing to say, but because peace matters more than being right. This state of inner freedom also transforms how you experience love. Love becomes spacious instead of possessive. You care without clinging. You appreciate without fearing loss. You enjoy connection without depending on it for emotional stability. Buddhism teaches that this is the highest form of love because it is free of attachment and therefore free of suffering. When you quietly let people go, you also free yourself from emotional repetition. You stop reliving the same wounds with different faces. You stop attracting the same dynamics in new forms. Your energy changes, and with it, your experiences change. Buddhism teaches that inner states shape outer realities. As you become calmer inside, your life reflects that calmness. Eventually, you realize that emotional uncontrollability is not something you force. It is something that emerges naturally when you stop clinging, when you stop resisting endings, when you stop begging for consistency from those who cannot offer it. Quiet letting go creates the conditions for this strength to grow. And this strength is quiet. It does not seek recognition. It does not seek validation. It simply exists. You walk through life knowing that no one has the power to take your peace unless you give it away. This knowing changes how you stand, how you speak, how you move through the world. Buddhism teaches that liberation is not found in controlling others, but in releasing attachment to control. When you let people go quietly, you release the need to be emotionally governed by their actions. You return authority to yourself. You become the one who decides how deeply something affects you. In the end, becoming emotionally uncontrollable is not about building walls. It is about building roots. Roots that keep you steady during storms. Roots that allow you to bend without breaking. Roots that anchor you in awareness rather than reaction. Quietly letting people go is how these roots grow strong. And when they do, you discover a peace that cannot be shaken because it no longer depends on anything outside of you. 10. When you let go quietly, you remember that you were always whole. Buddhism teaches a truth that is simple but very difficult for the human mind to accept. You were never incomplete. You were never missing something that another person needed to provide. The feeling of incompleteness was created by attachment, by conditioning, by the habit of looking outside yourself for confirmation of your worth. Quietly letting people go is often the moment when this truth finally becomes clear, not intellectually, but emotionally. Most people grow up believing that connection gives them value, that being chosen makes them important, that being needed makes them secure. Over time, this belief turns into emotional dependence. You start measuring yourself by who stays, who leaves, who calls, who remembers, who prioritizes you. Buddhism teaches that this way of living guarantees suffering because it places your sense of self in hands that are not your own. When you quietly let people go, especially those you once depended on emotionally, a strange emptiness may appear at first. The mind interprets this emptiness as loss. It says something essential is gone. But Buddhism teaches that this emptiness is not absence, it is space. It is the space that was always there, but was filled with noise, expectation, and attachment. When the noise fades, the space reveals itself. In this space, something important happens. You begin to feel yourself again, not the version of you shaped by others' reactions, but the quiet presence beneath all roles. You notice your breath. You notice your thoughts slowing down. You notice moments of calm that do not depend on anyone else's presence. Buddhism teaches that this is your natural state. Peace is not created. It is uncovered. Quietly letting people go removes the constant pressure to perform emotionally. You no longer feel the need to impress, prove, explain, or adjust yourself to maintain connection. Without that pressure, your nervous system relaxes. Your mind stops scanning for approval. Your heart stops bracing for abandonment. This relaxation allows your true nature to surface, the part of you that does not need validation to exist. Many people mistake attachment for love because they have never experienced love without fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of being alone. Buddhism teaches that fear-based connection is not love, it is survival. When you let people go quietly, you step out of survival mode. You stop clinging, you stop bargaining. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into places where you no longer belong. As you settle into this new inner stillness, you may realize how much energy you once spent maintaining emotional bonds that were unstable. How often you worried, how often you waited, how often you hoped. Buddhism teaches that hope tied to attachment creates suffering because it pulls the mind away from the present moment. Letting go quietly returns you to now, where life is actually happening. Being whole does not mean you stop feeling desire for connection. It means connection is no longer a requirement for your emotional stability. You enjoy people, but you do not need them to feel complete. You appreciate presence, but you do not collapse in its absence. This shift is subtle, but life-changing. Buddhism calls this non-attachment, not indifference, but freedom from dependence. When you remember that you are whole, your relationship with solitude changes completely. Solitude no longer feels like punishment. It feels like rest. It feels like honesty. It feels like returning home. You sit with yourself without urgency. You observe your thoughts without being pulled into them. You exist without explanation. Buddhism teaches that this quiet companionship with yourself is one of the deepest forms of peace. Wholeness also brings responsibility. When you no longer blame others for your emotional state, you take ownership of your inner world. You become mindful of what you consume mentally and emotionally. You become selective about what you allow into your life, not from fear, but from respect for your inner balance. Buddhism teaches that awareness naturally leads to discipline, and discipline leads to freedom. Quietly letting people go also dissolves comparison. When you stop measuring yourself against others' choices, paths, or relationships, you return to your own rhythm. You stop rushing. You stop feeling behind. You stop questioning your worth based on external milestones. Buddhism teaches that comparison is born from forgetting your own completeness. When you remember who you are, comparison loses its grip. From this place of wholeness, future relationships change. You no longer enter them looking to be filled. You enter them already full. This changes everything. You communicate more honestly. You tolerate less confusion. You walk away sooner from misalignment. You stay longer where peace exists. Buddhism teaches that relationships formed from wholeness are lighter, clearer, and far less painful. There is also compassion in remembering your wholeness. You stop resenting people who could not meet you where you are. You understand that everyone acts from their own level of awareness. Some cling because they are afraid. Some distance themselves because they are wounded. When you are whole, you do not need others to be different for you to be at peace. Quietly letting people go becomes an act of gratitude rather than bitterness. Gratitude for what was shared. Gratitude for what was learned. Gratitude for the clarity gained through endings. Buddhism teaches that endings are not failures, they are completions. When something completes, it leaves wisdom behind. As you continue living from this inner completeness, you begin to notice that peace feels stable. It does not rise and fall dramatically. It does not depend on external events. It is quiet, steady, and reliable. This peace does not mean life becomes perfect. It means you become grounded enough to face imperfection without losing yourself. In the deepest sense, quietly letting people go is a spiritual return, a return from distraction to presence, from attachment to awareness, from dependence to inner strength. Buddhism teaches that liberation does not come from acquiring more, but from releasing what clouds the mind. When you release unnecessary attachments, what remains is clarity. And in that clarity, you remember something essential. You were never broken, you were never lacking, you were never incomplete. You were simply distracted by attachment. Quietly letting people go removes the distraction and reveals what was always there. A calm mind, a steady heart, a self that does not need permission to exist. This is the quiet power of remembering your wholeness. 11. Quietly letting people go is how the ego finally loses its grip. Buddhism teaches that much of human suffering does not come from pain itself, but from the ego's need to protect an image. The ego wants to be chosen, remembered, valued, and validated. It wants proof that you matter. It wants reassurance that you were important to someone's life. When relationships end or people drift away, it is often the ego that feels wounded, not the heart. Quietly letting people go is one of the most powerful ways the ego slowly dissolves. The ego does not want silence. It wants answers. It wants explanations. It wants to be seen as right, misunderstood, or wronged. It wants the other person to acknowledge your value. Buddhism teaches that this craving for recognition is endless. Even if you receive validation once, the ego will want it again. This is why emotional chasing never truly satisfies. It feeds the ego temporarily, but deepens suffering long-term. When you let people go quietly, you deny the ego its favorite tools. You do not argue, you do not announce your pain, you do not seek closure through confrontation. You do not try to control how you are remembered. This feels uncomfortable at first because the ego feels threatened. It interprets silence as loss. But Buddhism teaches that this discomfort is a sign of progress. It means the ego is loosening its hold. As the ego softens, a deeper awareness begins to emerge. You realize that not being chosen does not mean you are unworthy. Not being understood does not mean you are invisible. Not being remembered does not mean you did not matter. These beliefs belong to the ego, not to truth. Quietly letting people go allows you to separate your identity from other people's perceptions. The ego also thrives on emotional drama. It wants intensity. It wants reaction. It wants stories it can replay to feel important. When you disengage quietly, emotional drama loses its fuel. The mind becomes quieter. Thoughts slow down. You stop rehearsing conversations that will never happen. Buddhism teaches that peace arises naturally when mental noise is reduced. Another way the ego loses its grip is through humility. Quiet letting go teaches you that you are not meant to be central in everyone's life. You are not meant to be unforgettable to everyone you meet. You are not meant to stay connected forever. Buddhism teaches impermanence not to make life feel meaningless, but to free you from unrealistic expectations. When you accept impermanence, the ego stops demanding permanence. The ego also fears being alone because it confuses solitude with insignificance. It believes that if no one is watching, you do not exist. Buddhism teaches the opposite. Your existence does not depend on witnesses. Your worth does not increase or decrease based on attention. When you sit alone peacefully, without distraction, without validation, the ego weakens and awareness strengthens. Quietly letting people go also dissolves the ego's need to control outcomes. The ego wants to decide how relationships end. It wants the last word. It wants to manage narratives. Buddhism teaches surrender as wisdom. Surrender does not mean giving up. It means accepting what is beyond your control. When you let go quietly, you stop trying to manage how others think or feel about you. This releases enormous inner tension. As the ego loosens, emotional maturity deepens. You stop taking things personally. You understand that people act from their own wounds, fears, and limitations. You no longer interpret their distance as a statement about your value. Buddhism teaches compassion born from understanding, not self-sacrifice. You can understand without absorbing pain. This ego softening also changes how you relate to praise and criticism. Praise no longer inflates you, criticism no longer destroys you, silence no longer frightens you. You become emotionally stable because your sense of self is no longer built on reaction. Buddhism teaches that equanimity is the mark of wisdom. It is the ability to remain balanced, regardless of external conditions. Letting people go quietly also ends the ego's habit of comparison. You stop asking why others were chosen instead of you. You stop measuring yourself against someone else's position in another person's life. Buddhism teaches that comparison arises when the ego feels threatened. When the ego relaxes, comparison fades and peace takes its place. There is also freedom in no longer needing to be understood by everyone. The ego wants to explain itself endlessly. It wants to correct misunderstandings. Buddhism teaches that clarity does not come from being understood by others. It comes from understanding yourself. Quietly letting people go allows you to live your truth without defending it. As this lesson deepens, you begin to notice a shift in your emotional reactions. Situations that once triggered insecurity now feel neutral. Words that once cut deeply now pass through without leaving wounds. This does not mean you are numb. It means the ego is no longer interpreting everything as a threat. Buddhism teaches that awareness creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, freedom exists. Eventually, something profound happens. You stop needing emotional victories. You stop needing to feel right. You stop needing to feel important in someone else's story. You are content being present in your own life. This is not resignation. This is liberation. Buddhism teaches that the end of ego-driven desire is the beginning of peace. Quietly letting people go becomes a spiritual practice. Each time you release the urge to chase, explain, or react, the ego weakens. Each time you choose silence over drama, awareness strengthens. Each time you choose peace over validation, suffering decreases. This is how inner transformation happens, not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly and consistently. In the deepest sense, letting people go quietly is not about losing connection. It is about losing illusion. The illusion that you must be seen to exist. The illusion that you must be chosen to matter. The illusion that your worth depends on another person's attention. Buddhism teaches that when illusion dissolves, truth remains. And the truth is simple. You are enough without being validated. You are whole without being chosen. You are at peace when the ego no longer runs your life. This is the quiet power of letting go, and this is how the ego finally loses its grip. 12. Accepting impermanence is how you stop fighting life. Buddhism teaches that one of the deepest causes of suffering is not loss itself, but the refusal to accept impermanence. The mind wants things to stay the same. It wants people to remain how they were when you felt safe, valued, or understood. It wants moments to last longer than they were meant to. But life does not work this way. Everything changes, and when you resist this truth, suffering grows quietly inside you. Quietly letting people go is closely tied to accepting impermanence. When someone leaves your life, what hurts most is not their absence, but the belief that they should not have changed, that the connection should have remained the same, that the story should have continued as you imagined it. Buddhism teaches that this belief is an illusion. Nothing in life is designed to stay fixed, and expecting permanence from people creates constant inner conflict. Impermanence does not mean life is meaningless. It means life is alive. Just as clouds move across the sky and never stay still, relationships also move, shift, and transform. Some pass quickly. Some stay longer. Some fade slowly without clear endings. Buddhism teaches that peace comes when you allow these movements instead of resisting them. Quiet acceptance allows the heart to soften rather than harden. When you accept impermanence, you stop asking why something ended and begin understanding that endings are natural. You stop seeing change as betrayal and start seeing it as movement. You stop replaying the past and start grounding yourself in the present. Buddhism teaches mindfulness as a way of anchoring yourself in what is, rather than what was or what should have been. Many people hold on emotionally because they believe letting go means forgetting or disrespecting what they shared. Buddhism teaches otherwise. Letting go does not erase meaning, it preserves it without attachment. You can appreciate what was without demanding that it continue. You can be grateful without clinging. This balance is wisdom. Accepting impermanence also teaches emotional flexibility. When you understand that nothing lasts forever, you stop building your identity around temporary things. You stop defining yourself by who is in your life at any given moment. You stop collapsing emotionally when something changes. Buddhism teaches that flexibility is strength, not weakness. A rigid mind breaks easily. A flexible mind adapts. Quietly letting people go is an act of aligning with impermanence. You do not fight reality. You do not demand explanations. You do not cling to what is already dissolving. You step back and allow life to unfold. This allowance reduces suffering because it removes inner resistance. Buddhism teaches that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Suffering is created when pain meets resistance. There is also humility in accepting impermanence. You accept that you cannot control how long people stay. You accept that you cannot preserve moments forever. You accept that your role in someone's life may change or end. This humility frees you from entitlement and expectation. Buddhism teaches that entitlement leads to disappointment, while acceptance leads to peace. As you accept impermanence more deeply, fear begins to lose its grip. Fear of abandonment, fear of loss, fear of being alone all weaken when you understand that change is not punishment, it is nature. The same force that takes people away also brings new experiences, insights, and growth. Buddhism teaches trust in the unfolding of life, not blind optimism, but grounded acceptance. Accepting impermanence also transforms grief. Grief becomes softer when you understand that loss is not personal, it is universal. Everyone loses, everyone changes, everyone lets go. Buddhism teaches compassion through this understanding, compassion for yourself and for others. You stop isolating your pain and start seeing it as part of the human experience. When you stop fighting impermanence, your mind becomes quieter. You stop asking endless questions. You stop searching for closure that may never come. You stop holding on to emotional tension. Quietly letting people go becomes natural, not forced. It feels less like loss and more like completion. There is also freedom in knowing that you do not have to carry everything forever. Memories can exist without controlling you. Connections can end without destroying you. Buddhism teaches that attachment makes things heavy, while acceptance makes them light. When you accept impermanence, you carry life with ease instead of resistance. As this understanding deepens, you begin to live more fully in the present moment. You appreciate people while they are there without clinging to them. You enjoy experiences without fearing their end. You love without demanding permanence. Buddhism teaches that this way of living reduces suffering because it aligns with reality rather than fighting it. Quietly letting people go is not a failure to love. It is a success in understanding life. It means you have learned to flow rather than force, to accept rather than resist, to release rather than cling. This understanding brings a calm that does not depend on circumstances. In the end, accepting impermanence teaches you one of the most liberating truths of Buddhism. You do not need to hold on to feel secure. You do not need permanence to feel peace. You only need awareness of the present moment. When you live this truth, endings no longer feel like collapse, they feel like transitions. And in that understanding, you stop fighting life. You start living it. If there is one truth that runs through all these lessons, it is this: you were never meant to hold on to everything forever. Buddhism teaches that suffering begins the moment you start gripping life too tightly, trying to freeze moments, people, and emotions that were always meant to move. Quietly letting people go is not something you do because you are tired of loving. It is something you do because you have learned how to love without destroying yourself. Throughout life, people will enter your world for different reasons. Some will teach you, some will comfort you, some will challenge you. Some will walk with you for a long time, and some will leave without explanation. None of this is a mistake. None of this is random. Every connection shapes you in some way, and every ending carries a lesson. When you quietly let people go, you are not erasing the past. You are honoring it without chaining yourself to it. What changes most is not your life, but your relationship with yourself. You stop begging for clarity. You stop chasing emotional reassurance. You stop explaining your pain to people who cannot hold it. You stop measuring your worth by who stays and who leaves. In that stopping, something sacred begins. Your inner world becomes still enough for you to finally hear yourself. Quiet letting go teaches you patience. It teaches you restraint. It teaches you dignity. You learn that not every emotion needs to be expressed. Not every ending needs a conversation, and not every loss needs to become a wound. Some things are healed through silence. Some attachments dissolve naturally when they are no longer fed. This is not avoidance, this is wisdom. As you walk this path, you may notice that your life becomes quieter on the outside. Fewer people, fewer emotional highs and lows, fewer dramatic attachments. But inside, something far richer develops. Stability, clarity, self-trust. You begin to feel safe within yourself. You no longer need to escape loneliness because you are no longer afraid of your own presence. Buddhism teaches that peace is not found by controlling life, but by understanding it. People change, feelings shift, paths diverge. When you accept this deeply, you stop fighting reality. And when you stop fighting reality, suffering loses its power over you. Pain may still visit, but it does not stay. Loss may still happen, but it does not define you. Quietly letting people go does not mean you become distant or cold. It means you become grounded. You still feel, you still care, but you no longer abandon yourself in the process. You choose awareness over attachment. You choose peace over familiarity. You choose growth over emotional survival. And perhaps the most beautiful truth is this: when you let go quietly, you create space. Space for healing, space for clarity, space for healthier connections. Space for a deeper relationship with life itself. What is meant for you will not require you to shrink, beg, or suffer to keep it. In the end, letting people go quietly is not about loss. It is about freedom. Freedom from emotional chaos. Freedom from ego-driven attachment. Freedom from the illusion that your worth depends on someone else's presence. Buddhism teaches that liberation begins the moment you stop clinging. So let go gently. Let go without hatred. Let go without noise. And as you do, return to yourself. Because the peace you were searching for in others was always waiting inside you.